I would not be willing to cross him when it comes down to repercussions and ramifications if Vladimir Putin continues to choose poorly.
Now, Donald Trump has once again expressed frustration at President Putin, saying that he'll know soon if the Russian leader is just tapping him along. The US president told reporters at the White House that he believed his counterpart in Moscow may be intentionally delaying ceasefire talks, and he expressed disappointment at the latest Russian bombardment of Ukraine.
We're going to find out whether or not he's tapping us along or not. And if he is, we'll respond a little bit differently. I'm very disappointed at what happened a couple of nights now where people were killed in the middle of what you would call a negotiation. I'm very disappointed by that.
Well, President Trump said that so far he'd stopped short of imposing further sanctions to avoid screwing up negotiations, but he did say that could change. It comes as Russia has now proposed holding another round of peace talks with Ukraine in Istanbul on the 2nd of June. That's according to Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Let's talk to Matthew Bartlett, who's a Republican strategist who was in the State Department during President Trump's first term in the White House. Good evening to you, Matthew.
Hello, good evening.
Really good to have you with us. What do you make of those latest remarks from President Trump? Do you think he's really losing patience with President Putin, or is this just more of the expressions of frustration without any substantial action to follow them up?
Well, President Trump is a rare bird in American politics and certainly on the international stage. When it comes to Vladimir Putin, let's remember that the first administration was quite tough on Russia, whether it was encouraging the Europeans to disregard Russian gas or the sanctions, much less the engagement we actually had with the Russian military. Yet the president always had something of an affinity for Vladimir Putin, a one-on-one, some sort of a relationship that he felt was mutually beneficial. Now we are seeing President Trump trying to establish a peace process. And now it seems as if Vladimir Putin might not be going along with that. And the President Trump, is expressing, arguably rightfully so, displeasure in the Russian side and certainly with Vladimir Putin as well.
But we saw those remarks in the last few days of President Trump saying that Putin he's gone crazy, accusing him of the bloodshed, the latest attacks on Ukraine, which killed several people. When, of course, this is exactly what President Putin has been doing since that invasion more than 3 years ago.
Yeah, could not agree more. And it takes me, no privilege, yet always happy to say that Vladimir Putin is an invading, murderous dictator, a barbarian who started a war for no reason. Yet if we are going to find peace, unfortunately, it is sitting down with your enemies and doing the hard things that lead to a better world. So President Trump is offering that, is trying to facilitate that. That is an ambitious goal. That is a better goal for the world, for Ukraine, for Europe. Yet it might not be a goal that you can attain if Vladimir Putin continues his posture, even though there is a new sheriff in town, President Trump. So again, applaud President Trump's efforts of diplomacy and peace. And it seems as if I would not be willing to cross him when it comes down to repercussions and ramifications if Vladimir Putin continues to choose poorly.
Because what we've seen so far seems to be the Ukrainians' President Zelensky, except ever since those terrible scenes in the White House, it does seem as though relations there have been repaired somewhat. President Zelensky has said he'd be prepared for a full ceasefire. He's also signed that deal on rare minerals. It doesn't seem as though President Putin has offered any concessions, and indeed President Zelensky has warned that he's amassing further troops for a renewed assault on Ukraine. I mean, do you think that President Trump does need to try and follow up these expressions of increasing frustration, and to do so sometime pretty soon if he is actually going to achieve that goal? He talked about wanting to try and solve the war in Ukraine in his first 24 hours in office. That was never going to be quite achievable, but he clearly does want to end this war. Doesn't he need to perhaps confront President Putin more?
Yes and no. And we all remember, the Daytona, if you will, of President Trump and Zelensky, at the Vatican. And what a striking picture that was. Two people one-on-one sitting across from each other talking about peace. And then you've seen Dmitry Medvedev floating the notion of World War III. So you need to hold Putin accountable. You need to give peace a chance. But again, we do not want a further escalation here. But we also want, positive outcomes. There's a lot of rhetoric, some of which is warranted, some of which is preposterous, but ultimately it is about better outcomes, and that is yet to be seen. Yet we continue to work for that.
Let me ask you about these latest comments that we've heard from Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State. He's announcing new restrictions on visas for foreigners who are complicit in censoring Americans. He's written on X, it's unacceptable for foreign officials to issue or threaten arrest warrants on US citizens or US residents for social media posts on American platforms while physically present on US soil. He seems to be suggesting that he's not going to allow any more visas for people who are critical of the Trump administration.
It is unclear, but that is certainly one interpretation. There certainly is a perception that free speech, a tenet of a liberal democracy, is being lost, not just in the United States, but around the world, that either news outlets or individuals are being told by governments, what is permissible to say. We've seen, unfortunately, some of these realities around COVID here domestically in the U.S., maybe even internationally. So I think that is the pushback that you are seeing. But as you just said, the implementation can be quite murky and remains unclear what that means for an individual, for a country, for a company around the world, and what that how one would take what that litmus test and line looks like.
Yeah, I mean, is it clear to you who he has in his sights when he talks about foreign officials like that?
Directly, no. I guess there is a notion that certain governments have said you are not allowed to talk about XYZ on X. And that seems to be an infringement on rights, whether it's an American right or, again, one of the cherished tenets of a liberal democracy. So this is the pushback. One could say it is appropriate response to some of the encroachment that we've seen internationally. Yet again, the implementation of it is very, very murky. And the question is, who affirms this? What are the ramifications? It is a pushback. It is messaging, but the reality of the situation remains completely unclear. As to say, again, if you would have put it in reverse, does expressing your opinion now mean non-entry into the U.S.? So these are the difficult questions that arise when you have a policy that is somewhat reactionary.
Yeah, and it poses the question of whether it is really a defense of free speech to bar people from the country because you don't like what they've been saying.
I mean, again, that is the question, right? No one wants that. Everyone should be able to legally express their opinion, their perspectives. You do not want a government suppressing your opinion, yet also recognizing, that we do not, support those who are encouraging or advocating terrorism. I think the United States has been clear and affirming that. And now around the world, the question is, what are the enforcing mechanisms that the U.S. would have around free speech in a foreign country, whether, again, it's an individual or an entity or a company.
Just before we have to finish, let me just ask you about those latest remarks from Elon Musk. He's already indicated that he's not going to be continuing in that job at the Department for Government Efficiency for too long. But he now seems to be pretty unhappy at this big beautiful bill, as it's been called, that's just been passed, and he's saying that he's tired of being the whipping boy for everything President Trump does. Do you think we're about to see Elon Musk's departure from the White House team?
Unclear. It certainly seems he might be spending less time in the Oval Office. There are probably questions around his donor-client relationship with the president and the Republican Party. It seems as if Elon coming in and as someone who applauds think different, some of the tech mantra of updating, reforming government, got a very, very hard lesson in both civics and public sentiment. And it's not sometimes what you do so much as how you do it in government. And it does not seem as if his track record in government is nearly as accomplished as his track record in the private sector.
Matthew Bartlett, a Republican strategist who was in the State Department during President Trump's first term in office. It's been great to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
An honor, Carol.